I had an appointment with Sheriff Waak at 4:30.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
And so you're a little early?
Yep, I'm a little early. Yep.
He's expecting you.
Yeah, Tyler. Yep.
Hi there.
Hey, Sheriff. Ooh. Tyler.
How you doing, Tyler?
Nice to meet you. Where do you want to just talk out here? Okay.
That's fine.
All right. So I had requested complaints on officers. Chad Roberts talked to you at all and tell you exactly what I was doing?
Briefly, yeah.
Okay. So I was given the files for former Deputy Putes. In searching those files, I found that my file was not in there. And so my complaint on him back in 2006 was excessive force. He beat me up while I was handcuffed in the back seat of a squad car. And I complained about it when I came to jail. Nobody had me fill out a form. Nobody wrote down what I had to say. Obviously, that's what the conclusion is, since I didn't find it in the files that I requested. So, yeah.
I can tell you this, Tyler, that deputy doesn't even work here anymore.
I know that. He's former, yep.
And I don't know which staff member in the jail, but likely from 06 probably isn't back there as well. We have, I mean, you're certainly welcome to ask and look. I mean, that's,
yeah.
My goal is to be transparent as well. I have good intentions. I have a history of holding people accountable. The past is the past, and I'm moving forward. I'm new to this position, and I have good intentions. So
yep.
Take that into consideration.
Yep, definitely. And my goal, like I had told Chief Deputy, was just transparency, and what the truth is what the truth is. You know?
We have a pretty good relationship amongst the county. We don't have a high number of complaints. We don't make CNN news for our complaints, and when there's been an issue, a lot of times it has been a mistake, and there's a lot of resentment publicly, not necessarily locally here, but a lot of hatred towards law enforcement, which impacts safety to officers.
Yes.
So I would ask that you guide your thing on facts. You know, try to be factual. We're not going to ever be perfect.
Yep.
And we'll address issues that come forward.
My frustration, and you could probably hear it in the email that I sent you, was the runaround I've gotten, you know, not necessarily from you. We've only had the one request, but you know, trying to get files, and then, you know, it seems like if I ask for a file regarding myself or regarding another citizen, it's easy to come by. But if I ask for something about a law enforcement officer, then it's...
Well, and we have different rules, and I would challenge you to look into Police Officers' Bill of Rights.
Yep.
Read the statutes on law enforcement, and there are a few protections in there.
Yep, and I did. It took a little over 4 months, I think, to get Putes' records. And I talked to Andrea about this over there when I asked about the other officers. And I'm just trying to see if there's a pattern. Obviously, like I said, you know, you're new, so we have yet to see what your discipline. Exactly.
I'm here every day.
Yep. So. And so I understand that, but you know, to get that, so I got an estimated bill for, you know, $1,300, and I don't feel it's entirely accurate, and it is an estimate. You know, she made that clear, it's an estimate, but that's a lot of money. And I told her, I said, so if I pay $1,300 and then she said there's 114 files, so 114 employees, I'm guessing. They can, you know, refuse or sue to have that file, you know, remain sealed instead of getting it let out. So I could pay $1,300 and then all of them sue to keep them sealed, and I don't get nothing. You know, like, I'm not going to fork over $1,300 to not get anything. I'm just trying to look. What I would really, the goal would be is, you know, a citizen gets arrested for a DUI or battery or whatever it may be. It goes out in the paper. It's public knowledge. Now we have, you know, public employees, police officers. If they do some kind of misconduct, it's, you know, you guys handle it internally. The public doesn't hear about it unless it's something where it's a criminal charge and it makes, you know, then it's. But I would like to see that we're seeing the accountability. We're seeing, you know, the transparency is there, so it's showing us the accountability for when these officers do act up. And I
can comment on that. Typically, when someone makes a complaint and it's handled, the person who made the complaint leaves with a feeling of satisfaction that it was handled. So there isn't that need to say, well, look, these 4 officers made these mistakes the last 6 months. I mean, if we're going to scrutinize them to that level and everything's, you know, that, like I say, an officer's employee file, he can actually go to circuit court before a judge and have it,
Yep.
you know, and that's to protect their privacy. There's a lot of personality. People can't just walk in my office and sit in my chair. I've been elected to hold that chair.
Yep.
And I've been entrusted by the public to hold that chair in that office.
Yep.
Oh la la, oh well. King in the castle, king in the castle. Have a chair, I have a chair. Oh, go do this, king in the castle.
And so, you know, this is not a public forest. It's an agency, and we have a lot of sensitive information. And, you know, I'll just explain how I don't want recording inside the building.
I brought the articles that I read, and this was where you were talking about transparency and accountability. I liked what you were saying. I just want it to be true. That's all. We're gonna, you know, it's important to hire the best employees, do a thorough background check and a history fair and objective conduct. And I seen that, and I just found out, this is after I'd met with Chief Deputy quite a few times, that he has, there's a pending lawsuit out there. And I tried asking Andrea about it. She said she couldn't talk about it, and I said, okay, that's fine. But something like that, especially with what has happened almost 3 years ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, with Daryl Christensen. It just kind of raised its legs to me that, well, how did somebody not know that this was in his background? Or, you know, why would we want to hire somebody and put them into a position of chief deputy, and they have they're named in a sexual harassment lawsuit from a former employee, from a former, I think he was a chief in Illinois. And so that was concerning to me. And like I said, you weren't the sheriff at the time that he was hired, so I understand you didn't have that. But when you're talking in this article about it, not hiring Chad, but hiring somebody else with a similar background, would you make that same decision to hire them as a chief deputy?
Well, again, it's before my time, Tyler, so I didn't. I wasn't involved in this process.
Yep.
But I can say what I would recommend to you on this issue is wait till it's concluded. I don't have any specific comment on Chad. I know that's an ongoing thing, and that's why we don't comment, but wait till you see the conclusion. And
Okay.
when that case is concluded, we can sit down and talk about it, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. You're a part of that hiring process, right? So how about officers that have DUIs? Is that a deal breaker for becoming a police officer, or no?
It is not.
Okay.
It's not deemed an integrity crime.
Okay.
For example, I would deem an integrity crime as like a theft.
Okay.
Where can the public trust this officer if he's had a theft? Likely not. I deem OWI, and it's a mistake.
Yep.
Okay, if you make one mistake in life, you can pay your dues, and if you've learned from it and moved on and never had another one, we can work with that.
Yep.
Would I ever hire a cop that had 2 DUIs? Absolutely not. Never. The other thing we look at is time frame. You know, in Wisconsin, first offense DWI is not even a crime.
Yep.
It's a civil forfeiture.
Yep.
So it's not a deal breaker. It's a huge red flag, but it's not something that we would immediately rule somebody out. And what we do is we look at the person's conduct.
Yep.
Okay, how much alcohol did they have? Is it a problem for them in their life?
Yep.
You know, so it's not a deal breaker as an officer. It's a hurdle.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? If you have one and you're applying for jobs, it's going to be a hurdle. You're going to have time between the incident.
Yep.
Now the other thing we have is we have cops that are on the job and occasionally get an OWI.
Yep.
That's not unique to here. That's
Yep.
You've probably read the paper. St. Croix County had an incident a while
Yep.
back. That
Dresser, chief.
is if a working cop gets one, we can still work with that if, you know, several reasons. Cooperated with the process. They weren't belligerent, mean, nasty. honesty.
Yep.
If they own the mistake, admit the mistake, and then seek help,
Yep.
we can work around that. I mean,
The transparency and accountability, I was curious, based on the former sheriff, higher standards than he may have had or something like that.
dealing with discipline at the police level is governed by statute and procedures.
Former examples of misconduct, maybe misconduct's not the right word, but that's what I'm going to use, of a former officer here and what his punishment was, and see if you agree with it. So in reviewing the Putes files, I had seen that he had a write-up for discharging his firearm in the building. He also had one for a complainant called in and said that, I don't think the complainant was, but their kid or something was run off the road. He was on his way to a call but didn't have any emergency lights on and ran this person off the road going 100 miles an hour, whatever it was. I can't remember what the GPS said. Both of those resulted in a 20 or 30 minute, I couldn't read the writing, counseling session. And in my eyes, that's far below accountability, because if it was somebody else did it, we can't unholster our weapons unless we're using them for protection, you know what I mean? So for somebody to do that, especially with the amount of training that they have, it's a 30-minute counseling session seems a little bit too less, because they should have known far more than anybody else that you shouldn't pull it, you're going to pull a trigger, and what do you think is going to happen? The other thing is with the car, if I was to ride down the road at 100 miles an hour and ran somebody off the road and they called it in, I'm probably going to get in some trouble, not a 20-minute talking to. Would be my assumption.
It's hard to say, and I'm not going to comment specific to it, but what
Yep.
I'm going to tell you is progressive discipline.
Yep.
Okay, if we have an employee that's never had a complaint and then we get a driving complaint, it may just be something as simple as a verbal reprimand.
Yep.
Or the goal, like with anything, is compliance. We want our employees to adhere to policy and procedure. On tests of just cause,
Yep.
we use progressive discipline, and there's a procedure for it. Now, when you mention criminal stuff, we would never certainly investigate our own deputies for criminal activity. We would have another outside independent. As the sheriff, if someone alleged a deputy did a crime, I'm not going to investigate that. That's going to be given to an outside agency so that there's an objective investigation.
Yep. So if it's not a criminal complaint, what would be the complaint? Just a general complaint?
Just a general complaint. It could be a policy violation.
Policy violation.
Procedural,
So, yep.
Whatever.
Disrespect or
Conduct.
Conduct.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. A person such as myself making the claim and the complaint that an officer assaulted them while they were handcuffed, would that be criminal? Because in my eyes, that's criminal because that's assault and battery, or I don't know what the exact term would be. They're different, or would that be looked upon as a behavioral type issue and would be handled internally?
Well, we would look at the totality of the circumstance, what the total situation is. I'm certainly not going to say that law enforcement is perfect. We don't do things right all the time,
Yep.
And that's why we train hard. That's why we do what we do. Some of these sensational news stories that get out there, once the true facts come out, they're not that sensational, and it's found that the police were doing what they were supposed to. I don't have a problem with you doing what you're doing, Tyler. Just try to not create hatred towards the police.
Yep.
If you want to expose something, fine.
So that being said, when it comes to the ID law in Wisconsin, now it says that a police officer can ask you for your ID, upon a reasonable suspicion of a crime that you're about to commit, you have committed. Is that the case, or is it any time an officer asks you for an ID, you got to give it to him? Because that's not how I read it, and that's not how a lot of people read it. I just want to get your take on it.
I guess every situation is a little different. If you're driving your vehicle, I have a
Yep.
right to see your
Yep.
ID.
That's-
If you're a passenger in a car, I don't have that right.
Yep.
You may work your way into giving me a right if I feel you have contraband or something like that.
Yep.
But one thing I would ask you to research is Terry versus Ohio.
Yep.
That's a very common practice for law enforcement. Suspicious behavior, suspicious activity.
Yep.
That's the kind of stuff that we can stop and try to ID people.
Yeah, activity, I thought the Supreme Court ruled that wasn't enough to ID. It had to be suspicion of a crime.
That's the interesting part of law enforcement.